Captain Ryan sat at the controls of his ship, his fingers dancing across the console, guiding the craft through the rocky asteroid belt. It was a routine mission, nothing out of the ordinary, just a simple cargo run through a quiet section of the galaxy. His mind wandered as the ship hummed steadily, but his attention snapped back to the controls when an alert suddenly blared. "Unidentified vessel approaching," the ship's AI announced. Ryan's heart skipped a beat. There shouldn't have been anyone out here. Not in this part of space anyway. His hand instinctively reached for the steering controls, adjusting the ship's course to avoid the unknown ship. But it was too late. The unfamiliar craft, much larger and far more advanced than his own, collided with his ship, sending a shockwave through the cockpit. The lights flickered, and the sound of metal screeching against metal filled the air. Ryan cursed under his breath as the ship lurched violently, forcing him to brace himself against the seat. The alarms went off again, this time signaling a hull breach. Ryan quickly unbuckled himself and bolted out of the seat, rushing toward the control panel to check the damage. The systems were offline, and a deep groan echoed from the ship's frame. It wasn't just the electronics. There was something else, something worse. Through the glass windows, he saw the alien ship. It was massive, sleek, and built for deep space travel, with intricate designs that were unlike anything Ryan had ever seen. It was definitely not of human origin. As the ship drifted helplessly in space, Ryan realized he might not be the only one in trouble. Come on," he muttered to himself, desperately trying to bring the systems back online. His hands worked fast, pressing buttons and flipping switches, but the damage was too severe. Suddenly, a new alarm blared. A door opening. Ryan turned to the airlock. Through the small viewport, he saw a figure approaching. It was a person. No, an alien. She floated toward him, her long silver hair flowing effortlessly, her skin shimmering in the dim light of the cockpit. She was dressed in an elegant flowing outfit, a kind of shimmering fabric that seemed to ripple with an otherworldly glow. Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief as the alien figure stepped into the cabin, her presence both majestic and unsettling. She was tall, slender, and beautiful in a way that was unfamiliar, her features both striking and ethereal. "Who are you?" Ryan stammered, trying to form words. The alien looked at him, her large eyes scanning him as if she were analyzing his every move. Then she spoke, her voice calm but filled with authority. "I am Princess Selena of the Dratheri Empire," she said. Her words were slow and deliberate, but Ryan could tell she was fluent enough in some form of his language. "And you are not supposed to be here." Ryan blinked. I didn't mean to." He glanced back at his damaged ship and then at her. "This wasn't my fault. Your ship came out of nowhere." Princess Selena tilted her head, clearly processing his words. "I can see that, human, but that does not change our situation." Ryan ran a hand through his hair, trying to think. "Right. So, what now? We're both stuck here." Selena's gaze softened slightly. "Indeed, my ship is damaged beyond repair. And your vessel? It is a human craft. It cannot withstand the harsh conditions of deep space without proper assistance." Ryan nodded grimly. He hadn't anticipated a friendly encounter, but the reality of the situation was clear. He was stuck in the middle of space, alone with an alien princess from a powerful empire. A situation that was both dangerous and uncertain. The two of them would have to rely on each other to survive. "Okay," Ryan said, his voice steadying as he forced himself to focus. "We need to figure out how to fix both ships then, before this becomes a bigger problem." Selena's eyes narrowed, her expression thoughtful. "You would help me? After this crash, I am royalty, human. My people will come looking for me." Ryan met her gaze with a sense of determination. "It's not about your title. It's about survival. And right now, we're both stranded." She considered this, her gaze softening. "Survival. Yes. Very well. But know this. I will not let you fail. Ryan took a deep breath. Neither will I. For a moment, they both stood in silence, the weight of their predicament settling over them. There was no escape now. Neither of their ships were functional, and they were both far from any help. The stars outside the ship window shimmered, beautiful but cold, indifferent to the humans, and aliens trapped in space. The sound of the malfunctioning ship's systems faded into the background as Ryan and Selena began to assess their next move. They didn't know each other, and there were many unknowns between them. But in this moment, one thing was clear: they had to work together. There was no other choice. Ryan walked toward the ship's console and began to pull up the diagnostics, mentally noting all the repairs that needed to be done. Selena moved to a nearby panel, her long fingers brushing the alien technology with familiarity. Ryan was surprised by how quickly she adapted to the human ship's technology, her hands working with precision. "We have limited supplies," Ryan said, looking over at her as she worked. "But if we can combine your knowledge with mine, maybe we can make this work." Selena's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something more than just cold determination in her eyes. There was trust. "We will," she said softly, the alien princess and the human pilot bound together by the will to survive in the vast emptiness of space. The ship's hum filled the silence as they began their work. It was the beginning of something new, a partnership neither had expected, but one they would need if they were to have any chance of making it out alive. Ryan wiped the sweat from his brow as he sat in the pilot's seat, staring at the glowing console. The ship's power systems were still down, and with every passing second, his hope for a quick fix slipped further away. They were stranded, and unless they worked together, there was no telling how long they would be stuck in deep space. Beside him, Princess Selena moved with purpose, her delicate hands adjusting the broken panels and wires with an ease that surprised him. She had immediately shown a natural aptitude for understanding the alien technology, something Ryan couldn't help but admire. It was clear she wasn't just royalty. She was well trained in the technical aspects of her people's advanced technology. Still, they were working with two very different types of technology, and the language barrier wasn't making things any easier. Ryan glanced at her, frustrated. "I can't believe how much damage this ship took. We'll need to get the engines online, or we'll drift here forever." Selena nodded, her face serious. She turned her attention to a strange, glowing panel near the rear of the cockpit and began manipulating it with a set of tools she pulled from her ship's equipment bag. The soft hum of her ship's alien technology filled the cabin, but Ryan didn't have the slightest clue how to communicate with it. "Do you understand how to fix this?" Ryan asked, his voice tinged with concern. The princess looked at him, her large eyes reflecting the dim light. She nodded but didn't speak. Instead, she pointed to a small device she had pulled from her bag. It was unlike anything Ryan had seen before, smooth, silver, and emitting a faint blue light. She held it up, as though asking him to take it. Ryan frowned. "What's that supposed to do?" Selena tilted her head, her gaze thoughtful. She looked at the device, then back at Ryan, and seemed to realize the communication barrier between them. Slowly, she placed the device on the console in front of him and pointed to it again. She made a soft humming sound, trying to get him to understand. Ryan, feeling both helpless and curious, reached forward and picked up the device. He examined it carefully, but there was no obvious way to operate it. The surface was smooth, with no buttons or switches. He looked back at Selena, hoping for some guidance. "What do you want me to do with it?" he asked, his voice softer this time. It was clear she wasn't going to speak much more. Her language was still foreign to him, and she hadn't used the translator device yet. She gave him a small nod, as if acknowledging his question, then motioned to the console. With a swift gesture, she moved her fingers in a circular motion, as though signaling him to place the device into a certain spot. Ryan, still unsure, placed the device where she indicated. The moment he set it down, A soft vibration pulsed through the ship, and the console blinked to life. A holographic map of the damaged systems appeared, highlighting the areas that needed attention. "Well, I'll be damned," Ryan muttered under his breath. He quickly started to work, pressing the buttons on the console, and the holographic map shifted to show a clearer picture of the ship's main systems. The alien technology, combined with his own knowledge of the ship's structure, was allowing them to make progress. Selena's eyes lit up when she saw the map, and she motioned for him to follow her. She moved to another panel, a more intricate one near the back of the cockpit. She gestured for him to help, but when Ryan stepped closer, he could see she was having trouble with a bundle of tangled wires. Ryan raised an eyebrow. "You need help with that?" Selena nodded, her frustration evident. It seemed that despite her skills, the unfamiliarity of his ship was still a challenge. Ryan grinned. He had no idea how to operate the alien technology she had shown him, but he knew how to untangle wires. With a quick motion, he grabbed the bundle of wires and began working through the mess. "I'm no expert, but I can handle this," he said, trying to lighten the mood. Selena watched him for a moment, then gave him a small smile. It wasn't much, but it was enough for Ryan to feel that they were making progress, at least in terms of trust. She pointed to a compartment on the wall, and he opened it, pulling out a few tools. Together, they managed to get the tangled wires under control, working in silence. When the wires were finally sorted, Selena stepped back, clearly satisfied with their work. "We're getting there," Ryan said, wiping his hands on his jumpsuit. "But I still don't know how to get the engines up and running. We're going to need a lot more than this." She tilted her head and studied him. There was a strange look in her eyes, as though she were considering something, weighing the situation. Slowly, she retrieved the translator device from her bag and pressed a few buttons on it. A faint buzz filled the air. And then, much to Ryan's surprise, her voice came through clearly. "I can help with the engines," she said in perfect English, "but I will need your cooperation." Ryan blinked, shocked. "Wait, you can understand me now." Selena nodded, her face calm. "I knew your language from the moment we collided, but I did not wish to speak until we had a plan." Ryan let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. "Well, that makes things a lot easier." "Indeed," she said, her voice steady. "But now we must focus. The engines must be repaired quickly, or we will drift for days." Ryan didn't need any more convincing. They had just made their first real breakthrough. They weren't just stranded with no way out. They were working together, learning from each other. The challenge ahead of them was still great, but for the first time since the crash, Ryan felt a glimmer of hope. "All right, let's get to work then," Ryan said, his voice filled with newfound determination. Together, they would make it. Ryan and Princess Selena worked in silence as they made their way to the engine room. The dim lights of the ship flickered, casting shadows on the walls. But they didn't slow down. The task ahead of them was daunting, but both knew it had to be done quickly. They couldn't afford to waste time. As they reached the door to the engine room, Ryan took a deep breath. This was the heart of the ship, and fixing the engines would be no easy feat. He opened the door, and the harsh hum of the engine's malfunctioning systems filled the air. Sparks flew from one of the main power conduits, and the smell of burning wires lingered in the air. Ryan winced at the sight, but Selena remained calm, her eyes scanning the room with a practiced gaze. She stepped forward, her fingers brushing over a panel on the wall. "The damage is extensive," she said in her now perfect English, "but it is not beyond repair." Ryan nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over him. For a moment, he had doubted whether they could fix the engines at all, but Selena's confidence reassured him. It was clear that despite their differences, they were a team. She had skills he didn't understand, and he had skills she could use. "What do we need to do?" Ryan asked, stepping forward to assist her. Selena pointed to a large power conduit that had been severed in the crash. This conduit is damaged, and it needs to be reconnected before we can restore power to the engines. We also need to replace several damaged components. Your tools, please." Ryan grabbed his tool bag and handed it to her. He watched as Selena deftly sorted through the contents, picking out the necessary tools without hesitation. Her movements were efficient, and she seemed to know exactly what needed to be done. She had the air of someone who had worked with complex systems before. "Okay, let's get to work," Ryan said, feeling the pressure of the situation weighing down on him. He didn't want to think about the consequences of failure. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. Together, they worked in harmony, each of them using their unique skills to solve the problems that arose. Selena took the lead when it came to the alien technology, her delicate fingers gliding over the components with precision. Ryan, on the other hand, handled the human systems, using his knowledge of his own ship to stabilize the power grid and connect the wires that would eventually bring the engines back online. As they worked, Ryan found himself impressed by Selena's ability to adapt to his way of thinking. She didn't hesitate to ask questions when something didn't make sense to her, but she was quick to pick up on the solutions. Her intelligence was undeniable, and Ryan began to realize that her reputation as a princess was not just due to her royal status, but also because of her skill and intellect. "You're really good at this," Ryan said, wiping sweat from his brow as he worked on one of the main consoles. "How did you learn all of this?" Selena paused for a moment, her hands stilling over a particularly difficult piece of machinery. "I am not just a princess," she said quietly. "I was trained to lead my people, to understand the complexities of both politics and science. My people rely on me to make decisions, and those decisions often involve technology. I've spent much of my life learning how to repair and manage the systems that power our empire." Ryan nodded, impressed. He had always known that leaders like her had responsibilities beyond what people saw, but hearing her speak about it made him realize just how much she had been prepared for. It wasn't just about ruling. It was about surviving and understanding the very systems that kept her world functioning. "That's a lot to take on," Ryan said, genuinely awed by her. "But I can see why you're in charge." Selena didn't respond immediately. Instead, she moved to another part of the engine room and began working on a set of damaged pipes. Ryan followed her, still processing her words. He couldn't help but wonder what her life was like before the crash, how different it must have been from his own life. "Where is your ship from?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. "I mean, I've never seen anything like it." Selena's eyes flicked toward him as she worked, her hands never stopping. "My ship is a Dratheri cruiser, built for deep space travel. We travel long distances, exploring and maintaining peace between the various planets in our empire. We have many ships like this one, but this particular vessel is unique. It houses my personal guard and the resources I need to oversee my kingdom." Ryan was fascinated by the story. It seemed so different from his own life, where his world was limited to Earth and the technology they used. But Selena's world, her empire, was vast and full of complex systems that he couldn't even begin to understand. "Sounds like you're responsible for a lot of people," Ryan said, looking around the engine room. "Must be tough." Selena's hands paused for a moment, and she glanced at him. "It is not always easy," she said quietly. "But responsibility is part of leadership. I do what I must for my people, for my planet." Ryan respected her more with each passing minute. Despite the tension and the danger of their situation, she had a calm strength about her. It was a strength that he could relate to, even if their worlds were worlds apart. After hours of painstaking work, they finally reconnected the power conduit and replaced the damaged components. Selena stood back, wiping the sweat from her forehead as Ryan tested the systems. The hum of the engines slowly grew louder, and Ryan smiled, feeling a surge of accomplishment. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with relief. Selena gave him a small smile, her eyes glinting with a mixture of pride and determination. "We are not finished yet, human." But this is a start. Ryan looked out into the dark void of space through the viewport. It felt like a lifetime ago, when he thought they might never escape. But now, thanks to their combined efforts, he could see a faint glimmer of hope. Together, they were going to make it. The engines hummed steadily, now operational thanks to their combined effort. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. Ryan sat back in the cockpit, his eyes scanning the readouts on the console. The ship's systems were far from perfect, but they were moving in the right direction. He glanced over at Princess Selena, who stood near the door, her face calm and collected as always. For a moment, Ryan allowed himself to relax, but the silence between them felt heavy. They had made incredible progress, but there was still so much to do. The ship wasn't just going to fix itself, and they were far from safety. Selena broke the silence. "We still need to navigate out of this region of space," she said, her voice steady. "The longer we stay here, the more likely it is that another ship will find us. We cannot afford to be captured or—" "Captured?" Ryan interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "Who would be capturing us?" Selena's eyes flashed with a brief, unreadable expression. "Not all beings in the galaxy are as friendly as your kind. Some would rather see us lost or destroyed than help us." Ryan felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard stories of ruthless space pirates and warlords, but hearing it directly from Selena made it all too real. He suddenly felt the weight of their situation settle back onto his shoulders. He stood up, straightening his uniform. "We need to figure out where we are. Then, we need to move, before anyone notices us." Selena nodded. "I agree. I've already scanned the area. We're currently in a remote sector, but it's not far from several more populated regions. If we make it out of here without drawing attention, we can make it to a safe zone." Ryan wasn't entirely sure what a safe zone meant, but he trusted her judgment. She had shown nothing but competence and calmness since they had begun working together, even when things seemed impossible. Together, they moved to the cockpit, where Ryan began inputting coordinates into the navigation system. Selena watched him carefully, occasionally offering advice on course corrections. Her knowledge of space travel was impressive, though her methods were different from his own. She seemed to be able to calculate angles and distances in her head, where Ryan had to rely on charts and readouts. "How do you do that?" Ryan asked, genuinely curious. "You just seem to know where we need to go without even looking at anything." Selena looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It is a skill I have developed over many years. I was taught to understand the flow of space itself, to sense where the best paths are, to predict what dangers lie ahead. It is part of being a leader, understanding not just the systems, but the environment." Ryan marveled at her answer. "That's incredible." She gave him a small smile, though it was brief. "It is a necessary skill, if I am to protect my people." Ryan's mind raced. She wasn't just a princess. She was a leader, someone who understood responsibility and strategy in ways he could never have imagined. He had always thought of royalty as distant figures, removed from the practical world. But Selena was different. She wasn't just sitting around waiting to be rescued. She was active, calculating, making decisions that affected not just her life, but the future of her entire people. The two of them continued working in silence as the ship slowly began to move. The sound of the engines, now smooth and steady, filled the cockpit. Ryan couldn't help but feel a growing sense of admiration for the princess. Her ability to adapt and lead, even in this dire situation, was nothing short of impressive. After several minutes, the ship's engines began to hum a little louder, the navigation system kicking into gear. The distant stars ahead looked endless, their cold light shimmering like the quiet promises of space itself. Ryan felt a sense of purpose return to him. They were moving forward, and that was something. "Are you ready?" Selena asked, her voice steady. "Once we leave this sector, we'll need to be careful. I'll be watching for any signs of pursuit." Ryan nodded, taking one last look at the cockpit. The ship, though battered and broken, was slowly coming to life. They were making progress. "Let's get out of here." He set the course, and the ship began to glide forward, easing into motion. The stars stretched out ahead, the vastness of space seemingly endless. Ryan felt a strange sense of peace in that moment, as if the calm of the universe was echoing his own resolve. He wasn't alone in this, and that fact gave him more strength than he realized. Selena, standing beside him, was silent but focused. He could see the concentration in her eyes as she kept her senses tuned to every flicker on the console, every shift in the ship's movement. She was the kind of leader who would never stop working, never stop planning, even in the face of danger. As they moved further away from the wreckage of their crash, Ryan couldn't help but think about what had brought them together. It wasn't just the crash, it was their shared goal to survive, to escape, to live another day. They were both far from their homes, far from the safety they once knew. But in each other, they had found something powerful, an unexpected alliance. Ryan didn't know what the future held, but for the first time since the crash, he felt as though they might have a chance to survive, a chance to make it home, and maybe, just maybe, a chance to see beyond the stars to something greater than either of them had ever imagined. "Hold on," he said, his voice filled with determination. "We're going to make it." Selena's gaze met his, and for the first time, there was a sense of understanding between them, a shared purpose. The stars outside were endless, but together, they might just be able to find their way. The stars outside the cockpit windows blinked like distant beacons, their light offering no warmth, no comfort. But Ryan felt a strange sense of calm wash over him as the ship glided deeper into space. It had been days since the crash, and although they had made great progress, there was still much left to do. But in this moment, it felt as if the universe itself had given them a brief respite, allowing them to gather their strength before the next challenge. Selena was silent as she stood beside him, her eyes scanning the vastness of space. The two of them had become a team, unspoken, but undeniably so. They worked in sync, almost as if they had known each other for years. She had helped him understand the inner workings of the ship, her sharp mind and calm demeanor guiding him through the more difficult tasks. He, in turn, had shared his knowledge of Earth's technology, teaching her how to make use of the human-made systems on the ship. Even though their cultures were worlds apart, they had found common ground. They were both survivors, fighting for their lives, and that bond had grown stronger with each passing day. There was a mutual respect between them now, one that had been built on trust, understanding, and a shared purpose. The ship hummed as they moved further into the unknown. Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still out there, lurking in the vastness of space. They had to remain cautious, alert, and prepared for whatever might come next. There were still many dangers ahead, and the journey was far from over. "I think we're clear for now," Selena said, breaking the silence. Her voice was calm, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes. "We've moved far enough from the crash site, but there are still factions that may be looking for us. It won't be long before someone notices the disruption in the space lanes." Ryan nodded, his mind racing with the implications. They couldn't stay in one place for too long. They had to keep moving, keep ahead of whatever forces might be hunting them. But at the same time, they couldn't ignore the toll the journey had taken on them. The ship was barely functioning, and they were running low on supplies. "I know," he said quietly. "We can't afford to rest for long. But we also need to find somewhere to refuel, get some fresh supplies. This ship won't make it much farther without them." Selena's gaze shifted to the console, where the map of nearby star systems flickered. "There's a small trading outpost nearby," she said, pointing to a location on the screen. "It's not far, and it's neutral ground. We might be able to find what we need there." Ryan's eyes narrowed. The thought of heading toward a trading outpost made him uneasy. He didn't know who they might run into, or what kind of people operated in that area. But at this point, they didn't have much of a choice. "We'll have to be careful," Ryan said, his voice low. We don't know who we can trust. This place could be full of all kinds of people, some good, some bad." Selena nodded, her expression serious. "I'll handle the negotiations. I'm used to dealing with different kinds of people. I know how to read them." Ryan felt a brief flash of admiration for her. She was always so calm, always so composed, even when the situation was at its most dangerous. He had seen her handle stressful situations with an ease that came from years of experience, and he knew he could rely on her. They continued their journey, the ship moving steadily toward the outpost. The journey was tense, but in a way, it felt good to be moving forward again. It was a reminder that no matter how far from home they were, they still had each other to rely on. And in space, where the unknown could strike at any moment, that bond was more important than ever. Hours passed, and the outpost slowly came into view, a small station floating in the emptiness of space, surrounded by a handful of smaller ships that looked as if they had seen better days. Ryan took a deep breath, his mind racing with thoughts of what might await them. He had never liked the idea of entering unknown territory, but sometimes there was no other choice. As they approached the docking bay, Selena turned to him, her gaze steady. "We have to stick to the plan. We get in, find what we need, and get out. No distractions." Ryan gave a small nod, but he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that settled in his stomach. There was something about this place that didn't sit right with him. But for Selena's sake, he kept his concerns to himself. She was the leader here, the one with the experience. He trusted her judgment. The ship docked with a soft thud, and the hum of the engines ceased. They had arrived. Ryan's heart raced as they prepared to leave the ship. He glanced at Selena, who was already heading toward the airlock. Her confidence was unmistakable, and he couldn't help but admire her. She had led them through so much already, through the crash, the repairs, and the constant threat of danger. Now, they stood on the threshold of a new challenge. The outpost was a place of opportunity, but it was also a place of uncertainty. Ryan didn't know what to expect, but he did know one thing. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. He followed her out of the ship, his mind focused on the task ahead. They had to find supplies, find a way to continue their journey, and most importantly, stay one step ahead of anyone who might be watching. The outpost stretched out before them, quiet and still, like a waiting predator in the dark. Ryan stepped off the ship, his boots making a soft clank against the metal floor of the outpost. The space station was quieter than he had expected. The walls were lined with worn-out panels, and the air smelled faintly of oil and machinery. Around them, the quiet hum of equipment could be heard, a stark contrast to the vast silence of space outside. Beside him, Selena moved with graceful confidence, her posture straight and alert. She seemed at ease, like she had done this 1,000 times before. Ryan admired her calm demeanor. As much as he wanted to, he couldn't shake the uneasy feeling in the pit of his stomach. They were stepping into a new world, one filled with unknowns. In space, danger could be anywhere, even in the most unlikely places. "Stay close," Selena murmured, her voice steady. "We don't know who's here, but I'll handle the negotiations. Just follow my lead." Ryan gave a quick nod, his senses on high alert. He could feel the eyes of several people watching them as they walked through the docking bay. The people here didn't seem hostile, but he knew better than to judge based on appearances. Space was a harsh place, and it didn't matter what you looked like. It was your actions that defined you. As they moved further into the station, they came across a few groups of people scattered around, talking in low voices. The air was thick with the tension of a place that felt far from safe, but also far from hostile. There were merchants selling wares, some humans, some not, but everyone seemed to keep to themselves. Ryan couldn't help but notice the way the others looked at Selena. There was a curiosity in their gazes, a silent acknowledgement of her otherworldly beauty. It didn't take long before they reached a small, dimly lit marketplace. Several makeshift stalls were set up, selling everything from food rations to electronics. The smells of strange, alien foods filled the air. It was a bit overwhelming, but Ryan kept his focus. He had one goal in mind: get what they needed, and get out without drawing attention. Selena stepped up to one of the stalls, her eyes scanning the items on display. A middle-aged merchant, his alien features hidden under a thick layer of fur, looked up from his work. His eyes widened slightly when he saw Selena, and Ryan could tell that he was sizing her up. Selena didn't flinch. She knew exactly what she was doing. "We need supplies," she said calmly, her tone even but firm. "Fuel, food, and anything else that will help us get out of this sector." The merchant's eyes flickered toward Ryan before settling back on Selena. "I might have what you need," he said slowly, his voice gravelly. "But it'll cost you. Nothing is free around here." Ryan stepped forward, instinctively reaching for his pockets, but Selena stopped him with a slight gesture. She was the one in charge now. She exchanged a few more words with the merchant, and Ryan noticed how her tone shifted, less demanding, but more persuasive. She was negotiating, and she was doing it well. Minutes passed before the merchant finally nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll give you what you need," he said, "but I want something in return." Ryan frowned. "What do you want?" The merchant smiled, revealing sharp teeth. "Information. Tell me what you're really doing here. What's your ship's story? Who are you running from?" Selena's eyes narrowed. She hadn't expected this. Ryan could see the subtle shift in her posture, the way she became even more guarded. But she didn't back down. "We're not running from anyone," she said firmly. "We're simply passing through. And if you're smart, you'll give us the supplies we need, or you'll find out just how costly it is to cross us." For a moment, there was silence. Ryan could feel the tension rise between them, but then the merchant's expression softened. "Fine," he muttered. "I don't care who you are. Take your supplies and go." Without another word, he handed over the goods, fuel, food, and even a few spare parts. Ryan felt a sense of relief. This was exactly what they needed, and the exchange had gone smoothly, despite the merchant's probing questions. "Thank you," Selena said coolly, turning to leave. Ryan followed her, his mind racing. They had avoided a confrontation, but just barely. It was clear that not everyone in the station was as neutral as they had hoped. There was more going on here than met the eye. As they made their way back toward the docking bay, they passed a few more people, but none of them seemed to pose a threat. Still, Ryan couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. Maybe it was just the unease of being in a new place, or maybe it was something more. "Let's get back to the ship," he said quietly, glancing around. "I don't trust that merchant." Selena nodded, her expression unreadable. "I agree. There's something off about this place. We need to keep moving." The walk back to their ship was uneventful, but the tension still hung thick in the air. As they approached the ship, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency. They had what they needed, but they couldn't stay here for long. The longer they remained on the outpost, the more likely it was that someone would catch on to their presence. Ryan turned to Selena. "We need to leave as soon as possible." Selena's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, their shared understanding passed between them. They didn't need to say much more. The ship was their only safe place now. As the airlock closed behind them, Ryan felt a sense of relief, but also a renewed determination. They were closer to their goal now, and nothing, not even the dangers lurking in the stars, would stop them from reaching it. Ryan sat at the controls of the ship, his fingers tapping nervously on the console. The engine hummed steadily, and the ship's systems blinked with activity. Through the viewports, he could see the station shrinking away as they slowly drifted into open space. He sighed, finally allowing himself to relax. They were free for now, but he knew their journey was far from over. Beside him, Selena stood silently, her gaze fixed on the dark expanse of space beyond the window. There was something distant in her eyes, something that Ryan couldn't quite read. She had been quiet ever since they left the station, her usual calm demeanor replaced with a strange stillness. "You okay?" Ryan asked, breaking the silence. His voice was softer than he intended, but the tension between them had been building for days now. He couldn't help but feel that there was something unsaid between them. Selena glanced over at him, her eyes flickering with something. Was it sorrow? She didn't answer immediately, and for a moment, Ryan wondered if she would at all. But then, she sighed, a small but heavy sound, and walked over to the navigation console. "I'm fine," she said softly, her voice carrying an undercurrent of something Ryan couldn't quite place. "But we're not out of danger yet." Ryan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. Space was never truly safe. They had only just escaped the station, but there were countless threats in the void, some far more dangerous than anything they had encountered so far. They needed to keep moving, always moving, or risk being caught by someone, or something, who would be far less forgiving. "We need to set a course for the outer rim," Ryan said, focusing back on the navigation system. "That's the safest route for now." Selena didn't argue. Instead, she began working with him, entering coordinates and analyzing the data as it appeared on the screen. Her skills as a navigator were unmatched, and even though Ryan had been handling the ship's systems since they started this journey, he never hesitated to let Selena take the lead when it came to navigating the stars. As they plotted their course, there was a soft chime from the ship's communications panel. Ryan glanced at it warily. Who could it be at this point? They were far from the station and out of range of the usual communication signals. Selena's sharp eyes met his, and without a word, she reached for the panel, activating the transmission. The screen flickered to life, revealing a figure cloaked in shadow. The face was mostly obscured, but Ryan could make out enough to see the tension in the person's posture. This wasn't a casual conversation. "Selena," the voice on the screen said, low and menacing. "You think you've escaped. You're not safe." Ryan's hand instinctively moved toward the ship's controls, ready to react if things went south. But Selena remained calm, her expression unreadable as she leaned in closer to the screen. "I told you," she said, her voice steady but with an edge of warning. "If you thought you could control me, you were wrong." The figure on the screen seemed to pause, and for a brief moment, Ryan could see a flicker of hesitation in their eyes. Then the figure spoke again, though their voice was quieter, almost regretful. "You don't understand what you're involved in. There are powers far beyond your control. Don't think you can hide from them." Selena didn't flinch, her gaze never leaving the screen. "I don't need to understand everything to know that I won't be a part of your plans anymore." The figure seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. But know this, Selena, you've made enemies, and there's no hiding from them forever." With that, the transmission ended, leaving Ryan and Selena in tense silence. "Well, that was unpleasant," Ryan muttered, breaking the silence. His hands clenched the armrests of his seat. He had a feeling that this wasn't the last time they'd hear from whoever that had been. Selena didn't answer immediately. She remained standing by the console, her back slightly turned, lost in thought. Ryan couldn't help but wonder what was going on in her mind. He had seen her deal with danger before, but there was something different now, something heavier. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked again, his voice softer this time. Selena finally turned to him, offering a small, almost tired smile. "I'm not sure if I'll ever be okay, but I'll survive. We both will." Ryan felt a pang of guilt in his chest. He had always known that Selena was strong, that she was capable of handling things on her own. But there was a part of him that wished he could take some of the burden from her, help carry the weight of whatever it was she was dealing with. "Whatever happens," Ryan said, his voice firm, "I'm with you. We'll get through this together." She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze softening. Then, without saying a word, she nodded, as if his reassurance was enough for now. They didn't need to talk about it anymore. Not yet. Ryan turned back to the controls, setting their course for the outer rim. The stars outside seemed to stretch on forever, the void between them as vast as ever. But for the first time since they had met, Ryan felt a sense of peace settle over him. They weren't alone in the universe anymore. Not really. And whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. The ship powered up, and as they sped away from the dangers that had once seemed so close, Ryan couldn't help but think that this was just the beginning of their journey. The final escape might have been only the first step into a new chapter, one filled with more dangers, more secrets, and more challenges. But it was a chapter they would face, side by side. And that was enough.